Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to First Reaction TV. My name is J Mart. Today we're going to be reviewing the second part of the Tim Pool interview with Lance from the Surfs. If you don't know who Lance from the Surfs is, this is Lance.
I do politics, comedy from a dumpster fire perspective, and I have opinions. Say an alien just showed up and looked at your channel, Tim. I wanted to scream at that time. The baby could have lived. You could have done it. Why did you choose the other option? Because I like having a second penis. Oh no, I'm here for the dog pile. I signed up. I'm here for the dog pile.
All right, so that's Lance, and that was from the first half of the Tim Pool interview, where the conversation mainly centered around pro-choice or pro-life topics. Now, if you didn't check out part one, you really should go back and check it out. It was a pretty heated conversation where Lance took mainly a pro-abortion stance on the conversation. And if you didn't check it out, here's just a little clip from part one.
I'm in the traditional Democrat position, but you see, there is a tribal, amoral, illogical position of just let them kill the baby regardless.
Women are not getting abortions at the 9th month for pleasure or because they want to suddenly do it for kicks. No, that doesn't happen. Gentlemen,
so
I am not here to justify abortion when it happens as in it's a good thing.
No.
I don't celebrate it.
You're saying it doesn't happen.
No.
I've never said it doesn't happen. 13,000. Oh, it's her body though.
Yeah, it's her body.
If she wants to do meth, what's the big deal?
The big deal is that she's intentionally trying to kill a child.
And this is where he knew he fucked up.
Hold on there a minute.
Yeah, and I see where we're going.
I don't understand what you're saying.
All right, so that was just a couple seconds from the part one that we did, and Lance unfortunately contradicted himself, kind of disproved his own argument a couple times, and then kind of changed his argument a couple times mid-conversation, so it was pretty good. You should really go back and check out that video. But this was a really long interview, and moving forward, the conversation goes into LGBT rights, and Lance makes a couple more claims that don't really sit too well with the rest of the guys. So we're going to move forward. We're going to keep checking it out. I really hope you guys enjoy this video. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure you comment. Let me know what you think. I really appreciate you guys watching.
Budweiser.
Yeah. You're going to move to Bud? Because I do want to talk about LGBTQ plus
we got to do it.
So why I'm here. I have a really big problem with what I feel on this show is a lot of anti-trans hysteria and fear-mongering that takes place.
You want to open that book?
I have that book at home. We can talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
And I'm totally comfortable talking about that book. I've read it.
Should it be in schools?
I want to talk to you about the trans issue, though, because
right, and that's that's why I ask about the book.
Okay,
we
can get to the books and the schools, the curriculums, and everything that Florida's taken away. But you profess to be kind of like fact-based, science-based, right?
Yeah.
Like you pull up. I've noticed you want to pull up stats and figures and stuff like that.
Of course.
Why is it that you push propaganda when it comes to trans people?
Like what?
That is so far beyond the pale.
Like what?
Okay, let's start with gender-affirming care.
Mm-hmm.
Gender-affirming care, you're very, very against. I've heard you call it mutilation.
I don't call it mutilation. I've never said that.
That's what you say on your show.
I do.
No, I don't.
I don't know if he does. I call it mutilating children.
I call it child sex change.
When you were talking about Dwayne Wade moving his family,
someone in the crowd said, "Why are you mutilating your son?" That was a quote from someone else. I didn't say that. I call it.
But then you made.
And I've explicitly said I don't take the right agitator approach of calling it mutilation because that's not effective in having a conversation. I will plainly call it a child sex change as what it is. I'm not going to call it gender affirming or mutilation because I don't think those things accurately explain what it is.
Okay, so when it comes to gender affirming care.
All right, so I wanted to stop it here quick because things get dicey and they get dicey fast. Lance makes claims about Tim Pool using some sort of rhetoric and transphobic rhetoric and rhetoric that hurts the LGBT community. So I went back and I rewatched the entire segment Tim Pool did on Dwayne Wade's son, and Tim's telling the truth here. Not one time, not once did Tim Pool ever use that type of language about his son or people with gender dysphoria in general. Not one single time. And this is why people like Lance are a serious part of the problem here, where they take things and they spread lies, they spread disinformation, and they spread it out to their audience, and he says, hey, look, this is what Tim Pool said, this is what Tim Pool thinks, look how transphobic he is. And it wasn't even true or real to begin with.
Okay, so when it comes to gender affirming care, 0 to about 10.
Are you talking about child sex change?
No, I'm talking about gender affirming care. 0 to about 10 years old.
You got to define it.
The answer is yes.
You got to define it, okay? Because if you're talking about something different, tell us what you're talking about.
All right, so if someone is trans and they are young, and until they are about 10 years old before they go through puberty, gender affirming care would be in the form of you using different pronouns, preferred pronouns, and allowing them to dress differently.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
Do you have a problem with that? Does anyone here?
Yes, I do.
I don't.
Okay, so both of you don't.
Right.
Okay, so do you accept that there is no surgery being performed on children at that age, from 0 to about 10? There's nothing, there's no hormone blockers, there's no puberty blockers?
There is hormone blockers. I don't think surgery is happening on kids under 12.
So hormone blockers aren't given to children until they go through puberty.
That's not true. We actually pulled this up with Destiny. He actually called me out. I was wrong about a stat.
Okay.
What we found was 47,000 cross-sex hormones. I think it was something like 17,000 puberty blockers and like 2,000 double mastectomies for girls after the age of 13 or whatever. But
so that doesn't apply to anything I just said.
Puberty blockers were preteen. Puberty blockers.
Yes, puberty blockers.
They have to give them the puberty blockers before puberty starts.
Yes, of course.
Right.
So you're just reaffirming what I just said.
All right, so this conversation gets so dishonest so fast. Let's try to keep up.
There is no surgery being performed on children at that age, from 0 to about 10. There's no hormone blockers, there's no puberty blockers. So that doesn't apply to anything I just said.
Puberty blockers were preteen. Puberty blockers.
Yes, puberty blockers. They have to give them the puberty blockers before puberty starts. Yes, of course.
Right.
So you're just reaffirming what I just said.
All right, so I think Lance is trying to be a little deceiving here, and I think he's trying to be a little tricky. He's half right in this conversation. Children that age do not receive hormone therapy because you have to actually suppress the puberty that you're supposed to be going through until you actually get that hormone treatment. So in order to get that hormone treatment, what do you have to do? You have to take puberty blockers. Tim corrects him here and says, wait, there are children that age receiving puberty blockers. Lance just goes ahead and says, yep, you're just reaffirming what I said, when he said the complete opposite. A study done from Komodo Health Incorporated involving puberty blockers actually included children from the age 6 to 17. Over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started on puberty blockers. So what's extremely scary out there is that these studies could have a ton of people missing from them, where people had to pay out of pocket because their insurance didn't cover these procedures, where it collected Medicaid, free health insurance from low-income families, those types of numbers. But other people out there that had to pay out of pocket, or people that had private health care where some of the stuff wasn't covered and they had to pay out of pocket, none of that is covered in these studies. So a lot of these are undercounted numbers. So just from all the studies out there that include the Medicaid data or the free health insurance data from these states, we know that at least children from the ages of 6 years old are starting some of these treatments. So going the whole way back to the very start of this conversation, it disproves Lance's statement that children 10 and under are not receiving any puberty blockers.
From 0 to 10 till you're about to go through puberty, gender affirming care only comes in the form of using different pronouns, using different names, allowing them to dress differently, and that's it. And you don't have a problem with that.
Wait, Lupron too?
Okay, so we'll get to Lupron, but up to that point, you don't have a problem with any of this yet, right?
I'm saying,
and you agree that there is no surgery being performed on children at that age. 0 to 10.
Let me just start from the beginning so I can make sure I'm getting what you're saying right.
Yeah.
I don't care if parents call their kids names or whatever. I care about medical or surgical intervention.
Okay, so that doesn't happen until about the age of about 16. That's the average age for.
But you're wrong. Okay, like and look, we had Destiny on the show. We went into great detail about it. There are girls who are 13 who are getting this done, and there was a study. Actually, it was Canadian, I believe. 12 to 17, they had several hundred surgeries performed.
Okay, so again, I said the average age, but if you want to say that there are people who get this at 12, that could be the case.
Who would have it? I think
this guy is so dishonest that you can't make it 30 seconds without having to stop the clip. That's not what he said. He didn't say the average age. He said
that doesn't happen until about the age of about 16.
And until Tim pushed back, then it was, oh yeah, well, of course people younger might be having that. I said the average age, where obviously from Lance's point of view saying, well, the average age is 16. So that sounds a lot better than saying, hey, a 12-year-old is getting their chopped off. Like, that sounds a lot better, doesn't it, Lance? Unfortunately, this conversation is a lot like the pro-abortion or pro-life conversation that we did in the part 1 video, where depending where you get your statistics, you can find what you want to find. From Lance's point of view, there's plenty of websites out there where you can get on there and look up and they'll tell you, yeah, children aren't getting this done until 16 or 17. It's not happening to children younger than that. But if you get to the numbers, if you get to the healthcare providers and you go by the actual data, it's happening. Like, it's being recorded. It's factual data that's out there, and it's happening to kids, young kids. Once again, this doesn't fit Lance's narratives where we're just going to ignore the actual numbers and the real numbers. We're just going to go by a website saying, yep, only 16 or 17-year-olds get this done. It's misleading, it's factually incorrect, and it's just a ton more disinformation that you're putting out to your audience.
Okay, so again, I said the average age, but if you want to say that there are people who get this at 12, that could be the case.
Who would have it? I think
let's start with puberty blockers, Tim. Lupron. You both have a big problem with Lupron?
I don't know a lot about it, but I consider it a medical treatment.
Okay. Yeah, we shouldn't be giving Lupron to kids.
So you don't think you should give Lupron to kids? Why don't you want Lupron being given to trans kids?
Because it's a puberty blocker that inhibits the natural function and development of their body. And more importantly, I think my view is built upon what we've seen out of Europe already, right? So earlier on, maybe a few years ago, I was more agnostic on the issue until Sweden, Denmark, Finland abandoned this and the Tavistock Center got shut down. And the data they released said this actually caused more harm than good. And then I was like, well, okay, hey, how about that? And for some reason, in the United States, they're still hell-bent on moving forward with what we can already see from, better countries with better healthcare systems saying no to this, right?
Okay, so I can address those individually because I have the explanation as to why that happened. When it comes to Lupron, 0 to 10 is about the age where gender-affirming care only comes in the form of different names, pronouns, stuff like that. We can all agree that's completely fine.
We can't. I mean, I disagree. I disagree. You three can agree, but I don't.
Fine. Okay, fine. But it's their show, so I just want to concentrate on that for 2 seconds.
My position is more just like, I don't know, man, like social therapy stuff. They say that after puberty, desistance rates are between 65 and like 92%.
Okay, so that's completely false. I'll get to that. We have to do this.
Come on, bro.
We have to do this piece by piece first. Okay. Oh. Let's get through Lupron.
Hey, I just proved you wrong. Studies show 10 follow-up studies found desistance of 61 to 98%.
Yeah. Can you click on the Wikipedia article? Detransition topics.
You're missing the mic. Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Missing the mic. But
what are the studies? Where are we talking about? I would like to know if you are taking these studies specific. Well, because I have each one of them written down here, and I'm quite curious. Is the Drummond study one of them? Is the Wallen study? Is Stensma, the Swedish study, a part of this? The 2011 study?
Probably. I don't know.
Well, we should know. This is incredibly important for what we're talking about.
It's not. This is 2018. This is Gender Dysphoria in Adolescents, Current Perspectives in the National Library of Medicine.
Okay, scroll down to the conclusion of this one. Just
want to get the mic.
So
I'm just going to read this.
Sure, of course.
Adolescence is a crucial time for identity and psychosexual development in young people with gender identity concerns. The outcomes of GDC have been discussed in terms of its persistence and desistance. For most children with GDC, whether GD will persist or desist will probably be determined between the ages of 10 and 13 years, although some may need more time. Evidence from the 10 available prospective follow-up studies from childhood to adolescence, reviewed in the study by Ristori and Steensma, indicate that for around
it is Steensma. I was right. I asked if this was Steensma. Okay, I can answer this
80% of children who meet the criteria for GDC.
Right.
But you said 2011.
Oh, so there's multiple Steensma studies. They've actually built upon each other. And the problem with the Steensma study, unfortunately, is that they actually categorized people who were not trans in that study. They didn't compare people who were trans to people who were trans and then detransitioned. They compared people in the general population.
What's your source? What's your source for that?
The actual author of the study has come out since and said that. What can
I pull up to confirm that?
Okay.
Because look, I pulled up a study that said a thing. You've made a counterclaim. I will pull it up.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so go to.
Because I don't know who Steensma is.
Okay, so, Steensma, and the problem, I'll say one more thing because I had this written down. 45.3% of the people did not reapply for treatment. They counted that as people who were detransitioning when they weren't, in fact, doing that.
Wait, so can I ask you something?
Yes, go ahead. Okay, so he asked for the source. Let's do things in order.
I'm going to respond to what you just said. I need to respond to what you just said right now.
That last point is kind of important to respond
to. We're literally talking about desistance.
Right.
If they're including people who desisted, you'd have to get the number of those who desisted.
They included people who did not reapply for treatment. They counted that as someone who was desisting. That's just someone who didn't show up again. That's
literal desistance.
No, it's not. It's not.
That's literal desistance.
Not whatsoever, Tim. That is someone who has decided they just don't want to go talk to that doctor or experience things with that doctor. They could have gone off to a different doctor. They could have done something else. But that is not someone who has verifiably said, I was trans, I'm no longer trans. So, that's just people who did not show up.
Your thing.
All right, so just to be clear here, this life-saving, must-need treatment that these people need, or the world is just going to end, they didn't reapply for the treatment, and those people don't count as desisting? Like, this is just, there's so many slippery and slimy things that Lance does throughout this interview, and it just doesn't stop. Like, it is the entire 2 hours of Lance. That this stuff is just, hey, look, is this a Steensma study? Oh, yep, it's a Steensma study. No, not this Steensma study, though. Not this Steensma study. My Steensma study that's 9 years earlier than yours, that's the one we should go by, not the current Steensma study. Like, this is just getting out of hand.
Okay, so go to transadvocate.com/
I'm not going to I need a study or something, not an advocacy website.
Okay,
I pulled up a scientific study for you. I'm not pulling up a nonprofit.
Good job.
Advocacy
So
group.
this is an interview with the person who did the study in this article.
I have pulled up a scientific study for you.
And
you
the person who did, and I'm challenging you with the person who did the fucking study. And
you're telling me to pull up an advocacy website, which is not on par with a scientific study.
But it's featuring the person who did the scientific
study. Is there
a
counter study saying this is not correct?
Okay, if yes. An overwhelming amount. Okay, sure.
Let me pull that up.
Okay. Can you
look? If I pull up the NIH,
sure,
and then you say go to transadvocate.com, you understand why I'm not going to do this.
Cool. Cornell University.
I'm not going to Breitbart for my source on desistance. Okay.
Sounds good. Cornell University did a meta study.
What is it?
Okay, Cornell University did a meta study on 55 different studies. Just start looking up Cornell University meta study on detransition. Cornell University did a meta study on 55 different studies on detransitioning. Of those 55, they found 52 of the studies showed that people detransitioned at a rate of less than 4%. And of those people who did it, the reason they detransitioned was social stigma.
Okay, I got to address this right now. There is a problem we are facing in that you are saying a lot of things and I can't pull up any sources. At the very least, all I did was Google searched it. I pulled up the 2 studies that were associated with it and said, here's what it says. I have not given you my personal perspective on it. You've now given me your personal view on it.
No, I've given you the studies. These are 2 meta studies. I have a third meta study.
What are the studies? Let me please pull them up. I can't find what you're talking about.
The first one is Cornell University. They did a meta study
What's the name of it?
It's Cornell University's meta study of 72 studies on gender affirming care. And the third meta study that I want to bring up is a U.S. study. It's a 2015 U.S. transgender study.
But this isn't a scientific research paper that's peer reviewed.
No, this is a meta-analysis of scientifically researched papers.
Did you get that from what we know? Inequality.
But hold on. Like, do we have a standard on why should we accept?
If you want to know their methodology, there's a click here to view the methodology thing. You can find that out for yourself right there.
But this is not a peer-reviewed scientific paper.
This is a meta-analysis, Tim, of
I
peer-reviewed scientific papers.
I rejected it.
Okay.
No, the point is this. I said, give me a study, and you cannot do it.
I am on my way to give you a third meta-study. A combination of studies.
These aren't studies.
No, if we go study to study back and forth, Tim, this is going to take fucking forever.
Give me one study. One. I've given you 2. Give me one.
This is embarrassing.
I've got like
embarrassing. You can't give me one study? Okay. I've given you 2. And I didn't even make an assertion. I Googled it and pulled up what I found.
You want individual studies instead of meta-analysis, which is ridiculous, but sure, here's individual studies. The mental health outcomes in transgender non-binary youth receiving gender-affirming care from February 25th, 2022. This shows
let me type it in and pull it up for you.
Yeah, but I can explain to them while you're doing your own research. Kids who receive puberty blockers and
pull it up.
Mental health outcomes in transgender and non-binary youth receiving gender-affirming care, February 25th, 2022, peer-reviewed study. The findings, kids who receive puberty blockers and hormone therapy had 60% lower odds of moderate or severe depression and 73% lower odds of suicidality. Here's another individual study for you.
Hold on. That nothing to do with desistance.
Do you want to go back to desistance studies?
That's what I was asking you about.
Yeah, he's definitely hurting here. He's starting to feel a little defeated after the meta-analysis study isn't going too well, and the trans advocacy website didn't help his argument. Alright, so here's the trouble with this, and here's why he's getting so much pushback from Tim. The meta-analysis and all these different studies out there, these studies could be testing for different things. The testing is in different environments. It could be for different age groups. And if someone deep dives and picks and chooses what they want from each study to get the answer that they want to get, it doesn't make it a reliable study. It's a analysis of all these studies. So what Tim is asking for is, hey, I've shown you 2 flat and simple studies. I want one from you. I want you to just give me one. Not going back and forth on studies. I just want one from you, Lance. And Lance is getting exhausted here. And you would think that if Lance was actually coming from a good place here, and he actually believed the bullshit that he was saying, he wouldn't be so slippery and slimy to start reading these studies off before he even gives Tim a chance to pull them up. Like, he's not even giving Tim the information to allow him to try to pull up these studies. Like, it's just some cheap stuff, man. Like, Lance is going hard here. Like, he's going hard, and he's just trying to get away with whatever he can. The problem is that he's like a little mouse trapped in a maze right now, and every time he goes around a corner, it's another dead end, and he's getting frustrated.
I Google searched desistance. Wikipedia has 2 studies that say it's 61 to 98%. You said that's wrong. I said, what's your source?
Yes.
You didn't give me one.
I did on the spot.
You gave me a meta-analysis
we're on camera, so
that is not peer-reviewed. It's not a peer-reviewed source.
Meta-analysis. If you want to go back and forth, Tim, on single studies, like I said, this can take forever. So do
you not have a single study?
I've named you tons of studies.
No. You've given me a meta-analysis, not a single study.
A meta-analysis combines other studies. Do you understand how that works?
Yes.
So of that, the 55 studies that it looked, of the 55 studies that it looked at,
72 studies that have drawn a conclusion, and then someone looked at them and made a different.
Tim, you just rejected it outright when you saw it. You were like,
because it's not a study. It's not a study.
It's a meta-analysis of studies. These are different things. I'm explaining that to you.
But the problem is these studies have their own conclusions you're ignoring.
They combine their conclusions to reach their findings.
Let me.
All right, so this is just getting a little ridiculous at this point. They keep arguing over this. If Lance actually believed the BS out there, or if Lance was telling the truth, let's say, there should be 55 studies out there. 55 different studies, according to Lance, that prove his argument and that prove Tim wrong. 55. He could pick one out of 55. Or he could pick all 55 to prove him wrong. And he doesn't have any of them. That's how misleading this meta-analysis is or could be. Because, once again, imagine how easy it would be that if there's 55 studies out there and they all say the same thing and they all prove Tim wrong, they prove Google wrong, it should be pretty easy to find those 55 studies. But Lance doesn't have one of them?
Show me the actual study. I do not believe this is correct. I will not afford you some benefit to come in and make the same argument to me. If you do not have a study that is peer-reviewed and cited, then I'm not going to entertain your opinions.
So when I bring up the Cornell University study, that's
not a study, it's a meta-analysis.
Yeah, of 55 peer-reviewed studies, whose conclusion of 52 came to the fact that there is a less than 4% detransition rate. If you go to r/science, Tim, you can find out. No.
Come on. I asked you for, you're pulling up Reddit when I'm pulling up. What our standard is, or at the very least where I'm at is, if we're going to have any basic agreement on what is or isn't, there has to be a unified standard there, which is a peer-reviewed study, which is not absolute. If I have 2 peer-reviewed studies and the establishment narrative, when I search for it, says 61 to 98%, I will not accept your meta-analysis opinion the same as I wouldn't for someone who believes ivermectin works, because your argument is founded upon the same basis as theirs.
You have to be able to combine multiple studies because this is something that has been so thoroughly investigated globally for so long that to ignore the science and data on this is to flagrantly...
Well, there's not been a single large-scale randomized clinical trial for puberty blockers to treat gender dysphoria. There's not been one.
You all are very against Lupron, right?
Well, I don't know much about it.
I know. I just saying very against is pretty strong. Okay. I'm typically like we shouldn't give.
I'm saying there hasn't been one large-scale randomized clinical trial for these treatments.
All right. So another valid question was brought up, and Lance didn't have an answer. He was asked, "Well, wait a second. There hasn't been a single randomized clinical trial for puberty blockers on children, has there?" Then he got asked it again. Lance didn't say anything. Like, that's pretty damning, right? Like, that's damning. you have to be one hell of an ignorant person to say you know something. You know this stuff's safe for kids. You know that the benefit is great for kids. And then there's not even a study. Not one single randomized study. And you think you're so smart, that you're so knowledgeable, that you know more without ever doing a single study. Because what? You read some shit on the internet? Like, how self-absorbed and narcissistic do you have to be to believe this kind of stuff?
Or are we dealing with a kid who's just playing with dolls and the parents are incorrect, right?
And in that case, you would have a long process where they would have to do interviews with, again,
Except-
professionals who would determine
right.
whether or not it's appropriate. And people who go on puberty blockers, I want to add this, it's for a limited amount of time. They want to do it only to be able to hold that off. No, it isn't. If you speak to the actual doctors on this, you only take it. No, Tim, let me finish the sentence. Come on. You brought me on your show. Let me finish this. You only go on puberty blockers for a short amount of time before you can be put onto HRT. They do not want to keep them on puberty blockers. And that way you avoid a lot of the potential negative side effects from that.
We had Helena Kirshner on the show, who walked into a Planned Parenthood and within minutes was given the maximum dose of testosterone.
Anecdote.
Absolutely.
Lived experience.
So when I say lived experience
anecdote.
happens, you say it doesn't happen. I'm saying it did happen.
No, I'm saying it can happen.
And
I'm saying you have to look at broader data. You have to look at broader
trends.
trends.
That's the issue I take, right?
Yeah, and it wouldn't make sense if I brought up a single horror story to you and said, this is fact. It can happen.
I said we don't want that to happen,
Of course, no one wants that to happen. But then
so
if we want to
happen.
understand how this is actually taking place around the world from an actual perspective of science, we have to look at the data. We have to look at meta-studies. We have to look at and analyze global understanding of this. When it comes to Lupron, by example, yes, it's true that Lupron is not FDA approved for the use of on cisgender children. There is a product that is FDA approved for use with children that is a puberty blocker, and it has been used for a long time, for generations and decades. It's Lupron. It was just being done.
No, but that's for an entirely different reason. That's for an entirely different reason. So to say we want to prevent a child from undergoing early onset puberty so that they can develop at a normal, healthy rate is entirely different. It is entirely different from saying we're going to administer puberty blockers because this child feels they're a member of the opposite sex.
But whether
that's an entirely different reason.
Whether or not it's
because you're looking for a different
is going to be the problem, right? You want to know whether or not its use is going to be dangerous on children.
And the reason for administering a certain treatment can render it dangerous. So, for example, if we have been amputating people's limbs for hundreds of years, if I go into a doctor and say, please cut my arm off because I don't want it anymore, and he cuts my arm off, that's medical malpractice. For you to jump in and go, we've been cutting people's arms off for hundreds of years. This is medically approved. People are allowed to do this.
Can I answer this?
Is not, yes, absolutely.
So what you're describing is called BIID, body identity disorder. I forget how it's spelled. It is a real phenomenon.
Dysmorphic.
Yes, it's extremely rare, but we know enough about it at this point to know that people will seek out to get operations on the black market if they have BIID. And what we found when people do that and go to the black market to have a limb removed is that it only provides a temporary amount of relief for their condition, and then it returns and they have further complications from the fact that they now have a disability and or medical complications that come from all that.
My point is not about any kind of body dysmorphia about losing a limb. My point is about drawing a false conclusion by a medical treatment being allowed under circumstance A but not being allowed under circumstance B.
This just goes right over Lance's head. And the fact that he didn't understand this simple concept of saying, hey, this medication may be safe for one reason, but it also may be unsafe for a different reason. And he had to get into body dysmorphia. Like, that's how much of a progressive, terminally online person Lance is here. He completely misheard what this man was saying right to his face, and he thought he needed to give an explanation, and he knew the answer. He knew the answer about body dysmorphia, and like, dude, it had nothing to do with that. It had absolutely nothing to do with that. This was a simple example of saying, hey, this medication works for choice A, may not work for choice B. It was really that simple.
You're saying we allow it for kids who have hit precocious puberty, but then we don't allow it for kids who don't want to go through puberty because they want to be a member of the opposite sex.
It's still not FDA approved. That's different.
But you understand my point. You can't claim those things are the same.
I just Google searched it real quick. Stat in 2017, 100 out of 100 with NewsGuard. Drug use to halt puberty may cause lasting health problems. More than 10,000 adverse event reports were filed with the FDA reflecting the experience of women who've taken Lupron, describing everything from brittle bones to faulty joints.
You know, regarding meta-analyses,
I'm worried about, giving kids things on an experimental basis.
But I want to keep down this path because I think
Yeah,
we're making good progress.
Let me
here.
ask you.
All right, so Lance thinks they're making good progress, but Lance didn't have too much to say whenever Tim brought up the article about the damaging effects of Lupron and the lasting effects it had on children who had taken it prior in life. So I ended up finding the same article that Tim pulled up on the Lupron side effects, and it really does have some scary things in it. For years, Sharissa had no idea why her body seemed to be failing at 21. A surgeon replaced her deteriorated jaw joint. She has been diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, fibromyalgia, a chronic pain condition. Her teeth are shedding enamel and cracking. None of it made sense to her until she discovered a community of women online who described similar symptoms, and they all have one thing in common. They all had taken a drug called Lupron. Women who used Lupron a decade or more ago to delay puberty or grow taller describe short-term side effects listed on the pediatric label: pain in the injection site, mood swings, and headaches. Yet they also describe conditions that usually affect people much later in life. A 20-year-old from South Carolina was diagnosed with osteopenia, a thinning of the bones, while a 25-year-old from Pennsylvania has osteoporosis, a cracked spine. A 26-year-old in Massachusetts needed a total hip replacement. A 25-year-old in Wisconsin has chronic pain and degenerative disc disease. Now, this last part is a quote from Sharissa. It just feels like I'm being punished for basically being experimented on when I was a child. I'd hate for a child to be put on Lupron, get to my age, and go through the things that I've been through. So here, once again, my biggest problem with Lance. It's not that he's saying, hey, maybe this stuff is a good idea. Hey, maybe this is what's best for these kids. He's saying, I know this is what's best for these kids. We need to push for these kids to be on this stuff. We need to push for these kids to take this stuff. And you don't know. Like, you don't know that. You don't have that information. You don't have a magic crystal ball to where you can tell everyone that you know more than everybody else. And the whole point of this entire argument, once again, is doing what's best for these kids, for the children's sake, keeping the kids safe who may not be able to make a decision in their life to where they're a fundamentally sound person because they're a child, obviously, so they can't make fundamentally sound decisions. So they rely on adults to help them make these decisions. And when you have people like this who push this stuff, who are telling you, it's true, it's true, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, you need to take this, and someone out there that may be listening to Lance's channel, say they get on this stuff, man, and 5-10 years down the road, they need their hip replaced. They need their jaw replaced. Their teeth are falling out of their head. Like, that's how scary some of this stuff is. And it's insane to me that you could get up there on any kind of platform, any kind of stage, and say, you know this stuff is good for children. You can't know that. You don't know that.
It's Lupron.
But there's still just so much more that needs to be talked about before people make life-changing decisions. And I don't know if we're making progress, but there is a lot more to this conversation. There's about an hour left in this podcast. It looks like I'm going to have to do a part 3 to review the rest of it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please hit that like button, comment, let me know what you guys think of Lupron, let me know what you think of this whole ordeal. I really appreciate you guys watching, and please hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. Thanks, guys.